Of course, to China. Governor Romney had much to say about our relations with China. Let's listen in.
I want a great relationship with China. China can be our partner, but that doesn't mean they can just roll all over us and steal our jobs on an unfair basis.
And there's Governor Romney. We usually do single best chart now, but sometimes you get lucky. We have one of the world's authorities on a linkage of currency to economics. Jacob Frenkel, out of Chicago, the former chief economic counselor for the IMF, former governor of the Bank of Israel, now with J.P. Morgan International. We're thrilled to have him this morning after the governor's comments last night. Good morning.
Good morning.
A currency manipulator, President Romney, in March, April, May, on a Tuesday, says they're bad, they're manipulators. What happens the next day?
I do not know what happens the next day, but I know what should happen. What should happen is to recognize that the U.S. will benefit from good trading relationship with all its trading partners, that China is an opportunity, not a threat, that China absorbs 20% of U.S. exports. So it is in this regard that, yes, one can negotiate, one should get the best terms of reciprocity, but in a war, there are no winners. In a war in which you retaliate against the other and they retaliate against you, is the war in which the rules are an eye for an eye. That's a world in which there are many blind people.
The market has spoken, even if manipulated. Here's too much information, folks, on dollar renminbi, and you can see here the significant move, 2 tranches of appreciation by the yuan. Sarah,
that's a stronger Chinese
that's a stronger yuan there as well.
And why China? I mean, many emerging market central banks, including Israel and others, intervene in the currency market.
No, we have to make some news here. Did you manipulate the shekel?
Absolutely not.
There's a break exclusive from Jacob Frenkel.
No, but it's part of these central bank policies to intervene in their currency markets. China, is this the truth, what the candidates are saying, that China costs us jobs in America?
The reality is that if you have open trade, it promotes prosperity all over the world, and that's the win-win situation. If you start splitting the pie and who gets what, you will get a smaller pie at the end of the day. But again, I emphasize, what is important is to ensure that we are competitive. In order to stay competitive, we need to have good training, good research, good openness, and stability. Financial stability is key.
The research abilities that you had years ago, right after Robert Mundell, just celebrating his 80th birthday, Mundell, then Frenkel, then Ken Rogoff and others, core research on currencies. What is different now with this globalization? Is that where our fear comes, that we're more globalized now than when you did your original research?
Well, the fear comes from the fact that everything now is fast forward, and the markets move much faster than the policymakers can ever move. And that's why it is so clear, it is so important that policymakers should broadcast and project clarity. If they are going to do zigzag and Mickey Mouse economics, markets will create havoc.
Is central bankers reflate? All of them are on inflation. The punch bowl is as big as it's ever been. Are we seeing a currency race to the bottom?
Well, there is a danger, and the important point is, like a very important former Fed chairman said, that the art of central banking is to take the punch bowl away before the party gets going.
Would you take it away right now?
I will definitely inform the markets of what are the conditions under which I will be able to change things. So it is important that one understands that the policy-making strategy is conditional on the state of the economy.
Okay.
All right, well, we do want to bring up our single best chart anyway because it dovetails very nicely with what Jacob is saying.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, great.
It's about how Made in USA is beating out Made in China, at least when it comes to stocks. Our single best chart is from Adam Parker of Morgan Stanley, and it shows how U.S.-centric stocks are outperforming companies with exposure to China, at least so far this year. It's actually U.S.-centric stocks minus the returns of China-exposed companies. And here we're getting better returns on retailers and industrials with U.S. housing exposure that are doing better than companies that really rely on Chinese sales. Parker says that while export numbers from Asian economies like mainland China, like Taiwan, like Hong Kong show potential bottoming of GDP, stocks with that exposure may have a hard time making up that difference.
You see, Scarlett, year to date, the S&P, this is folks with futures negative 14 right now, up 14%. That was up 16% a week ago or so.
Well,
you wonder if we're giving it away.
And it brings up the point, I mean, Jacob Frenkel, perfect person to ask here about the Chinese economy and all of your travels and your studies right now. When you hear talk of a hard landing or a more worrisome slowdown in China, do you agree?
I don't believe that we are going to see hard landing. China is going to grow this year, 2012, slower pace than last year, but it is likely to see a pickup, a moderate pickup the year after. The Chinese markets, real economy, do not have the fast-forward nature of many other economies because it is a very controlled economy.
Okay, don't move. I want to come back and talk about Europe. There's a lot.
And he's just back from Europe.
We could take Frenkel for like 2 hours today, folks. It could be a Jacob Frenkel marathon.
He also had some very provocative thoughts on the U.S. labor market. And big news today, big news this week, all week in the tablet industry. Apple expected to announce a smaller iPad today. Microsoft's Surface tablet goes on sale Friday. So the tablet wars are on.
Very good. Later on, David Kirkpatrick will join us on Facebook as well. Futures deteriorate negative 14.40. Dow futures negative 106. Jacob Frenkel with us. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
There is nothing quite as wonderful as money. There is nothing quite as beautiful as cash. Some people say it's folly.
Good morning, everyone. Bloomberg Surveillance. We look at equities, bonds, currencies, commodities. The markets are on the move. Futures were negative 12. They're now negative 16.80. Dow futures negative 118. And I've just seen the 10-year yield give away a little bit as well. The euro gives away 30 pips, 130.02. So all the markets beginning to move. Let's go to street news. Here's Scarlett Fu.
Apple expected to announce a smaller iPad at an event in California today. The smaller iPad would compete with 7-inch devices such as Amazon's Kindle Fire and Samsung's Galaxy Tab, and models, of course, from Google and Barnes & Noble. Another black eye for the BlackBerry, with the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency dumping its devices. Instead, the agency is spending $2 million to buy iPhones for its 17,000
Wow, that's amazing.
The reason? The BlackBerry can no longer meet the agency's needs. And the New York City Marathon now likely to erase Lance Armstrong's results. Armstrong ran 2 of the marathons, finishing in under 3 hours both times. And this, of course, as Armstrong was stripped of his 7 Tour de France wins after the U.S. anti-doping agency found him guilty of cheating by doping during his cycling career. You're outraged?
I'm outraged. Twitter, this matters. Send in your tweets to us on should Lance Armstrong be beaten to death for some of these past things.
And
I mean,
he may
I understand.
even have to hand back some of the winnings from that.
Yeah, I mean, I understand he's in the timeout chair, but enough. Send in your tweets on this. At B Surveillance, this matters is the hashtag. I'm curious what you think about this. There are 14 days to the election. It's a job economy, but also the crisis in Europe. We continue with Jacob Frenkel of J.P. Morgan International on all of these different synthesis of economics and finance. Dr. Frenkel, I want to first go to Europe. I was stunned at Paul Degau's op-ed today in the FT. He really goes after the Bundesbank. Here is Paul writing it up in the Financial Times. The Eurozone crisis has created a window of opportunity for nostalgic souls and the Bundesbank to restore its hegemonic position in Europe. What is the Bundesbank doing, and why should we in America care?
Well, the important thing is to understand that when Mario Draghi announced that he will do whatever it takes, he meant that there will not be shortage of liquidity, which was an important point. However, how do you provide liquidity? He insisted a country that wants it has to ask for it. Well, that's not good enough. If you ask for it, you must commit yourself for a program that will ensure that over time your economy will be able to stand on its own feet without having to rely on external finance. So basically the point is, both Spain and Italy, who would like very much to get the help of the European Central Bank, are reluctant for political reasons not to ask for it, because they think that if they will adopt a program and if the IMF will monitor the program, they will have a stigma. But let me tell you, if you are sick and you do not go to the doctor just because you are afraid that somebody will think that you are sick, you will not get health here.
Do you find that Chancellor Merkel will survive this? So many other leaders have fallen. She seems to have a resiliency with the German people. Can she survive as their leader?
Well, it is clear that what is guiding now the developments in Europe is the local politics in Spain, the local politics in Germany, and therefore, if you ask me for my guess, and here I do not have a comparative advantage, Angela Merkel will not do a dramatic thing before the elections next year.
I know you want to talk about jobs.
I want to talk about the U.S.
Frenkel's
economy.
focusing.
He's got a bunch of charts here, and it relates to, of course, the economy election. And the debate last night, certainly it's supposed to be on foreign policy, but the candidates both took the opportunity to talk about domestic policy. Here's President Obama on shipping jobs overseas to China.
You are familiar with jobs being shipped overseas because you invested in companies that were shipping jobs overseas. And you know, you're right. I mean, that's how our free market works. But I've made a different bet on American workers. You know, if we had taken your advice, Governor Romney, about our auto industry, we'd be buying cars from China instead of selling cars to China.
The president on the jobs economy. Forget China. Jacob Frenkel, you have done tremendous work lately on the U.S. labor market. What is the most disturbing factor at work here?
Well, we know that the U.S. unemployment rate has been on the decline in the past period, which is good news. However, we also need to notice that part of this decline is ascribed for the fact that labor force participation, the number of individuals who are seeking jobs, has declined. As a result, there is a statistical fluke there. In Europe, labor force participation goes up. In the U.S., labor force participation goes down. But the thing that bothers me most is the fact that we now have a situation where a very large proportion of those who are currently unemployed in the U.S. have been unemployed for more than half a year. 40%.
We actually have a chart of this.
40% of those who are unemployed have been unemployed for more than 27 weeks. Why is it bothering me? Because it is known that if you are unemployed for a very long period of time, there is a danger that it is not just cyclical unemployment. It may be a structural unemployment. And those things do not solve themselves by the recovery when the tide goes up. It requires structural measures.
Jacob, you're from Chicago, the anti-Krugman school. Would you suggest Professor Krugman's correct? We need more stimulus now?
What we need more is structural changes in the economy. Look what is happening here. We started from a problem that the government has lost its control over fiscal order, large budget deficits, large growing debt. More stimulus means larger budget deficit, larger growing debt. Monetary policy has been very expensive to push interest rates to about zero with very exploding balance sheets of the central bank. So conventional warfare or conventional ammunition has been exhausted. Of course, the Fed is very skillful in doing things unconventionally, but it cannot be sustainable for the long run. We need to do two things. First, add another policy instrument, and that's where the structural measures that increase the flexibility of the economic system, that speed up the adjustment, is critical. And by the same token, it is very important that as you go into a highway, you do not have the uncertainty of is there an exit or not. Articulate the exit. You don't need to implement it now, but articulate. Otherwise, you will drive with very great uncertainty.
Dr. Frenkel, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. Jacob Frenkel with futures again, -16.
And pay attention to the labor force participation. That was certainly one of the messages. All right, well, coming up in the next hour, Facebook earnings.